Hey, I'm Susan Palmer of LeadCat Press. Welcome to my studio update. Thanks so much for tuning in. Wow, this was an amazing week. I got to bring Adam Levy into my online guitar studio to work with some of my students, and I'll actually be dropping some of those insights throughout this session here. But you can always go to the description box below and find the chapter that most interests you. Here's what we're covering this week. For technique, I go over dynamics. I give you a couple exercises for that and share with you how that relates to articulation. For the reading, we go over a common question that arises when students encounter eighth note rests, which is how to mute those. For the chords and grooves, this is awesome. I share with you a system for transposing pop tunes. That's super easy, and I'm very excited about it. For the scales and soloing, I talk about enclosures and give you a little exercise for how to do those with a major scale. For the theory, we talk about relative versus parallel scales, and that was something that did come up in the Adam Levy workshop. And for the tunes, I actually just shared with you all my insights from the Adam Levy workshop. Well, not all of them, but some of them anyways. And since he's a songwriter and has worked with amazing musicians like Tracy Chapman, Nora Jones, and so many great guitar players and musicians in New York City on the jazz scene, just thought that would be an appropriate place to drop all of that. And the pro tip has to do with where you buy your guitars. So hopefully you'll find something of interest in this week's session, and please like, share, comment, all the things. Help me get this knowledge out to the world. Thanks so much for tuning in. So last time I talked about the importance of holding each note out for its full length. And today I want to talk about dynamics and how it relates to articulation. So I'm going to play a simple exercise, crescendoing up a B flat major scale and then decrescendoing down that scale. So you could hear I got louder as I went up and then more quiet as I went back down. And practicing that, it may seem like, well, that's a really simple exercise, but what that tells you is it helps you develop your dynamic range. So what I mean by that is what's the volume? How hard are you hitting the string to keep a good tone while you play as quietly as you can and then as loudly as you can? And on guitar, we just don't have the same kind of range as like a horn player or singer. And that's just the nature of this instrument. Yeah, we have, volume pedals and, volume controls and amplifiers, but really we want to have that control in our hands. And so that simple exercise really helps teach us what that range is, and it gives us something to practice in terms of dynamics. It's very concrete. Now from there, what you might want to do is alternate a quiet note followed by a loud note. So that would sound like this. And from there, what you might want to try is incorporating that in your phrasing. So being a little more conscious about where you're accenting the notes, where you're playing some notes louder than others. Something comes up when students get to usually pages 43, 44, 46 in the Guitar Lesson Companion is what hand do you use to mute the strings when you come to a rest? And my answer for that is always your fretting hand. And so the exercises on page 43, they're all the open A string, and you have a lot of eighth note rests in there. So if you're playing an open string, to create that rest, you just have to stop the string, and I usually do that with my left hand. Now if you're playing a fretted note, like C on the A string from page 46, you would just lift up your hand when you come to those rests, and that stops the string. If you try to do this with your right hand, you can, but I've just found that there's a lot of popping up and, kind of renegotiating your picking posture there. So I generally keep that in my left hand, and that's what I encourage students to do. But of course, if you're a left-handed guitar player, you'll use your right hand or whatever your fretting hand is. I want to share with you a system for transposing easy chord songs on guitar. And we're going to use bar chords, and I'm going to assume that the first chord that we play has its root note on the low E string. So if I'm in the key of G major, then G is my root note, and here's my G bar chord, my G major bar chord. That's my one chord there. Now, if I just walk up some of the notes in that scale and number them, I can get the chord degrees as well. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to go up here for 6. So if I attach chords to each one of those notes, I would have G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor. So again, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or G, A, B, C, D, E, and I'm attaching a chord to each one of those notes. I've harmonized the major scale in this. That's another lesson. I have gobs of them on YouTube here. So the chords for that, again, G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, and E minor. So I just went up to the 6th because those are the ones that are most often used in a lot of pop songs. So I've numbered those chords, and so now I'm going to apply some different chord progressions to that. Probably the most common chord progression is a 1, 4, 5. So if I'm in the key of G, here's my 1. So I'm just going to walk up that scale to find the 4 and the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here's my 1 chord, G, and then C is my 4 chord, and then D is my 5 chord. So what if I had a different chord progression? What about 1, 5, 6, 4? That would be 1, 5, 6, 4. And if you need help with that, just go back to that major scale and number those notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right? If we put those chords to that 1, 5, 6, 4 chord progression, I have G, D, E minor, C. So let's say that you're working with a singer and they're like, I can't do it in the key of G. I have to play everything in the key of B. And so, you could go through and transpose all that, maybe, bring out your, a piece of paper and a pen and figure that out. But a quick and easy way to do that is if you are well grounded in the fact that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that means that you could apply that same system, just start on the note B. So if we start up here on B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in the key of B major, here's my 1, 5, 6, 4. And you can hear that the relationship of those chords sounds very similar to when I did that in the key of G. And that's because we're following the same chord progression. So that is a really easy way to get started with transposing songs. Now, in the Guitar Lesson Companion, Volume 1, page 157 gives you 15 really popular, awesome chord progressions. I have the Roman numerals there as well as what those chords are in the key of C. And then in the box there, you have an opportunity to transpose those to different keys. And this system will help you do all of that. One other thing, you could start all of these chord progressions with the 1 chord being on the A string, but that, I don't want to get to that right now. I want you to lock down one way to do this first, and then you can do that with the A string. Maybe I'll do that in another lesson. There are so many scale exercises, and I love them all. I love how they trip up my fingers, they get my ear going, and they just help me to prepare for interesting musical lines when I'm playing. And so I want to show you one today that has to do with enclosures. So I'm going to be basing this off of an E string root C major scale. And the idea is that my target note, my first target note anyways, is the root note of this scale, which is C. But before I play C, I'm going to enclose that C. I'm going to play a note that is a diatonic above. So that means I'm going to start with a note that's in the key of C, which happens to be the note D. I'm going to follow that with a note that's a half step below C, which is B. And then I'm going to play C. So I have D, B, C. Now the next note in the scale is D, so I'm going to enclose that as well. I'm going to go up a diatonic note, so I'm going to play E, and then I'm going to play a half step below D, which is C sharp, and then play D. My next note is E, so I am going to play a diatonic note up, which is F, and then I'm going to play E flat and then E. So you get the idea. So the ascending form of this scale exercise sounds like this. Something that came up in the Adam Levy workshop was the difference between parallel keys and relative keys. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So a relative key shares its key signature with the key it's related to. You might be most familiar with C major and its relative minor, which is A minor. Those two keys are all natural notes, no sharps or flats. They just start on different pitches. Now, if you're using that in a song, that may be like, your A section of your song is C major, D minor, E minor, D minor, C major, D minor, E minor, G, and then that B section of the song goes to A minor. So we have a different feel right here. And, I've still got the same chords as I had in the key of C, but it's clearly in a different key. It just sounds and feels different. And then here, I'm going to take it back to C major, and you'll hear that we're back home again. So here's the C major. So all of that was in the key of C major. You could hypothesize that, you could theorize that, because all those chords were in the key of C, but there was that clear mark where I went to that A minor where the song just felt different. It was sad, to be cliche about minor keys. Now, another approach would be the parallel approach. And so a parallel would mean that we use the same root note, but we change the scale type. So C major's parallel would be, or one of them could be C minor. And those keys share different key signatures. So C major, no sharps or flats. C minor has a B flat, E flat, and A flat. And when you harmonize the C minor scale, you get a different set of chords. So we have more options when we're songwriting. So what if we took that same chord progression, so C major, D minor, E minor, and then A flat, G. So that A flat, definitely not part of the C major scale harmony. It is part of the C minor scale harmony. And in the way that I think about music, I would think of that A flat as being a borrowed chord. If you want to get real technical, I'm borrowing that A flat from the parallel minor of C major, which is C minor. So if you harmonize that C minor scale, you'll have a pool of chords that you can choose from, and then you can just kind of mix and match where you want those to go. Another way you could use that parallel minor is, let's say you've got this chord progression, same one, so C major, D minor, E minor to D minor, and this time I'm going to go to the parallel minor instead of the relative minor like I did in the first example. So here I'm going to go to G, kind of set us up for it, and then here comes the B section. Again, I'm rhythmically, prompting that very different section and feel, but I'm driven by the sound of that chord. That minor chord really made me play a little bit differently because it has a different feeling to it. So I hope that helps inspire you with your songwriting ideas and also give you a understanding of parallel and relative chords. For the tunes this week, I really just want to talk about the workshop that I put together for Adam Levy and my students. And in that workshop, there were so many great takeaways. And gosh, just to see like a true professional at work was just quite the experience. Each of my students prepared a song to play, and then they received very poignant feedback from Adam. And he's got the experience that really allows him to get right to the heart of things. And he's so personable. He offered his critiques and his advice and encouragement in just really helpful ways. So his attention to detail just really blew my mind. And I also really enjoyed how he used the fundamentals of music in how he was discussing these different tunes. I actually had a lot of questions prepared before our workshop that I wanted to ask him. But as he was analyzing and providing feedback for each student, he actually answered most all of them. And the only question I had at the end, I was asking him about his music education and what aspect of that was the most helpful for him. And what I took from his answer on that was he brought up the fact that in his musical training, he went to a music school, Dick Grove Music School, that I don't think exists anymore. But at any rate, what he appreciated from that approach was how he had one system that he learned all the way through. And I think that as students of music, as we all are, we have this tendency to, get into a topic and then want to, see the 50 different connections or many different ways to approach a concept. And as an educator, I eat that stuff up, but I've been doing this since I was a kid. So having that variety of approaches is really helpful. But I can also understand that as a student, it's really helpful to have one way and just carry that all the way through. Then you can go on and add the different levels and really get in deep on these different topics and concepts. So it was illuminating to me that that's one thing that he really appreciated about his music education, and it just makes me want to do that more. Really highlight that in my lessons with students of, I'm always telling them, we're going to do this one way first, and then you can explore the different options. This is not the only option, but it's a really great place to start. And example, I really view that in terms of the cage system. Learn the cage system. It's a really great way to understand the fretboard. There are other ways to understand the fretboard, and I think that's a really, important area that guitar players need to study. But the cage system really gives you a clean-cut, understanding of the entire fretboard and scales and chords and how they intermix. So that was one of my big takeaways from the workshop. And then the other was he talked about his experience writing a song a week for a year. And, at the end of that, you get, 50 songs, or 52 if you do it every single week, but let's say you take a vacation. So you get, about 50 songs from that. And that in itself is great. But as a teacher, the thing that really struck me was how by writing a song each week, you start to see your habits right away. And if you analyze those habits, you can see patterns that you may want to break. So, for example, you may start your phrases all on the first beat. There might be no anticipation, no upbeats on anything, no syncopation. So that might be something that you could address, as you're doing this for a year. And I really appreciated that. If you're writing songs and your strumming is always the same, you might say, hey, maybe my teacher, Susan Palmer, was right, and I should learn how to read music and start playing some different rhythms. Maybe I'm going to choose a rhythm from this esoteric classical piece or jazz piece from whenever and apply that to my new song and see what that starts to inspire. My pro tip for this week is very simple. It is that I want you to buy your guitars from an actual store in your neighborhood, if possible, or in your, somewhere local area. And the reason why is that most guitars have some issues with them from time to time, if not right out of the box. And it's really great just to be able to go back to the place where you bought it and say, oh man, this came off, and they'll be usually, if they're cool people, they will fix that right away for you. Sometimes for free, sometimes there's a small charge, but it's just really nice to have a relationship with a music shop in your area.